Okay. Oh, do I have a mic now? Welcome to our regular June board meeting. Glad to have everyone here. I want to remind board members of our mission, and I ask Mr. Moore to call roll.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Parker? Here. Ms. Kinzer?
Present.
Ms. Hopkins?
Here.
Mr. Pennings?
Here.
Mr. Moore is present. Mr. Atkinson? Mr. Sims?
Here.
Mr. Beaver?
Here.
Mr. Howell?
Here.
Ms. Morency? Here. Mr. Dudley? Here. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. I don't guess there's any school children to lead us in the pledge to the flag tonight. Won't you stand and we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll have a moment of silence. Where's the flag? Visualize the flag. Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we have a special recognition tonight. I'm going to ask Dr. Marzak to tell us about it.
We gotta adopt the agenda first.
Oh, we got to adopt the agenda first. It doesn't say that here. Okay.
Approval of agenda.
Approval of agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda, or is there any additions to the agenda that anyone would like to propose? Mr. Pennings, did you have an addition?
I don't have an addition, but number 11, Mount Pleasant Middle School soccer, I believe adding that now goes against policy.
Okay, why don't we add that for discussion at other business at 4.4, rather than have it on FYI?
That'll be fine, ma'am, thank you.
Okay. Okay, is there a
Ms. Kinzer?
motion to approve?
Chair Kinzer. I just want to verify, because the website is still, that I'm looking at is still showing the items, the two items I asked about, which were shown as 5.10.0
Okay,
and 5.10.1. They're still showing under FYI, and I don't know if, unless I'm just...
Let me go down to new business and see if it's on here. It's the first item under new business on our voting agenda. It may not be on here, but it's
Okay.
and it's on this sheet as well.
No, that's the schools
No. It's item 3.1 under new business, the memorandum of understanding for MCEA.
That's not what I'm asking about.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
I'm talking about the two items. The motion, there's a 5.10 is the MOU on the Malamore Road property with the City of Spring Hill, and then 5.10.1, which is the Spring Hill Planning Commission comments, those two things there.
All right, then we'll move those up to 4.5.
Okay.
Make sure I don't go by that. All right, now we've had the additions to agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
But I just want to make sure those are two separate items, so.
It would be
5.1 and 5.2?
No, it would be 4.5 and then the other one would be .1.
Okay, thank you.
I think. Now, is there a motion to accept the agenda as amended? That was you, Mr. Moore, or Mr. Beaver made the motion, Mr. Moore seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, let's vote, please. and that motion does pass. Now we're ready for recognition and announcements. Dr. Marzak.
Members of the board, thank you very much. Tonight, we need to recognize a very special employee in Maury County Public Schools. I would like to recognize Miss Anna Sears, who currently works with the Transportation Department. A little bit of note at the beginning, Miss Sears began working for Maury County Public Schools in October of 1999. She has served as a part-time substitute driver, a special needs bus attendant, and a special needs bus driver. She is currently the driver of special needs bus number 97. She also serves as the custodian for the pupil transportation and county central maintenance workspaces. Ms. Sears is a mother and grandmother who is active in her church and sings in the choir. She is an attentive and caring driver who knows her students and their families and has a great relationship with both. Ms. Sears is admired by her fellow drivers and is unassuming in her role, only wanting to do a good job and do right by her students. And we're honored to have Ms. Sears here tonight to recognize her as an employee that has just completed her 17th year of perfect attendance while working for Maury County Public Schools. Please give a round of applause for Ms. Sears. Congratulations, Ms. Sears. This is for you. And thank you for all that you do for us. Thank you very much. Thank you. Do you want to say a few words? Do you want to talk in the mic? Do you want to say anything? It's your opportunity. The platform is yours.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I'm just thankful to God that He's kept me healthy enough to keep on working. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Congratulations, Ms. Sears. You're very welcome, ma'am.
Okay, MCEA.
There we go. Am I? Okay, I am on. Good evening, Chair Kinzer, Dr. Marzak, school board, and other administrative staff. For those of you who don't know me, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jennifer Inc., and I'm the newly elected president of Maury County Education Association. I'd like to thank everyone who had the faith in me to lead, not just on behalf of MCA members, but all educators, support staff, and students of Maury County. Thank you also to the board members and administrators who have had such kind words of encouragement since being elected, including a handwritten note from Dr. Woodard. That doesn't happen anymore. I look forward to working with the board and administration. I go into this knowing that there will be challenging conversations, but we all have vitally important work to do. I firmly believe working together, promoting positivity and unity can only help our single cause students. School may be out, but our Maury County educators continue the work. They are holding camps for athletics, STEM. They're starting kids off on the right way through summer reading programs. They have worked hard to help students through credit recovery. They are planning and attending trainings across the state and going over the state line to other states, some with stipends, some without. They're also planning supply drives through Stuff the Bus that provide much needed supplies for students of all Maury County schools. They do this work for Maury County students. MCA was chosen by Maury County professional educators as the group of professionals they trusted to work on their behalf for collaborative conferencing. We did not take this task lightly. Many hours of deep, respectful and sometimes hard to hear conversations result in a memorandum of understanding that will be presented to you for a vote this evening. We work positively with the board members and administration with some respectful pushback from both sides that hopefully will result in a new memorandum of understanding. Passing this MOU will go a long way in rebuilding positive relationships amongst all parties. The result also started some much needed dialogue in areas of discipline and compensation that I hope to continue. I'm not only an educator in Maury County, but a parent. I take my role very seriously as I want the very best public education for Braden. I believe he can get the best in the state right here in Maury County schools. because I believe we have the best in the state of Tennessee, despite what tests say. In order to stay on top, it is critical we hire and retain the best of all employees. I believe the proposed MOU can help in not only obtaining but retaining quality employees. I had the pleasure of attending the County Commission in support of the budget that gave employees a 3% raise. It is a long time coming. It has been encouraging to hear both the board and Dr. Marzak fully support a 3% raise and understanding how important it is to obtain and retain highly qualified employees from Maury County schools. We all must work in a unified way to identify and acknowledge all the ways our students are successful. We must start seeing every person in Maury County school family, from pre-K to grade 12, from staff to administrator, as more than a statistic or a data point. I came across an interesting quote from an 11th grader named Asa Flood in a book by Ivory A. Tolson titled Bad Stats. It's actually called BS, but I decided to tell you it was Bad Stats. And she wrote in an essay contest called Breaking Barriers, and she said, "What about to be seen as a person with a name, and then poof, a statistic, and to many a shame." We have to stop reducing children to a singular data point. The students of Maury County are #more than a stat, used to deny much needed funding. Thank you, Chair Kinzer, and to the board for your continued support of our work and the most important work. I look forward to working with central office and the board to grow Maury together. And I wrote that, and I won't read it next time because I would get off task and I go way too long. So,
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. And thank you for being at the commission meeting, those teachers that came. We really appreciated it. Next, is there any delegations, and you want to see? All right, then we'll move to the consent items. Is there a motion to accept? Mr. Moore made a motion. Ms. Parker, I'm sorry, your light's on.
Sorry. I have a motion to amend the consent agenda to remove some things.
Okay.
In light of the discussion with the county commission.
Can we get a motion to accept and then you can amend?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I'll second it.
Okay, all right.
But then I would like to ask that we remove 2.8 and 2.9, which are the GMP for McDowell and the concept design for Spring Hill. In light of the discussion from the county commission, I don't think locking us into a GMP if we're not going to be getting that funding would be beneficial at this point.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Any discussion? Then we'll vote on the amendment. Okay, to amend it. We're ready to vote. And we're voting, Shirley, to amend the motion to accept the consent items. Correct? I think we have to vote on the amendment, and then we'll vote on the motion. Correct? We can do it as one? Okay. Great. All right. Okay.
So just to clarify what my amended motion is, we are voting on all consent items except for items number 8 and 9. Correct.
Yes. And I just want to say, I hope that we can talk about those two items at the next work session. I just don't know that we're prepared to adopt them now.
Right.
That's my thinking.
They were part of the work session discussion as well, but we will begin talking
I mean
about
in
them
July.
again and again and again,
Yes.
for sure. Absolutely. Okay, are we ready to vote? Okay, let me give you just another minute for her to get it.
Ms. Shirley? Yes, for me.
Okay, and that motion does pass. Okay, well, move on to the first item of business under new business. It's a memorandum of understanding, with the Maury County, Board of Education, School Board and, MCEA. Mr. Penning served as chair of that committee. Mr. Penning, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, thank you. I think we had, and Jennifer probably can tell me and somebody else, I think we had at least 5, maybe 6 meetings. They were good meetings, respectful, informative. I'd like to thank Mr. Robinson for being our kind of a spokesman, and for Miss Amanda for being our minutes taker. All did a good job. We had a good discussion amongst teachers, staff, and school board. Teachers received some of the things they wanted, some of the things they didn't get. The school board got some of the things they wanted, and some of the things that they wanted they didn't get. I think in all we had very good meetings, and we have come to a very good understanding, and I recommend that we pass the MOU.
Is that a motion to,
I make a motion to pass the MOU.
is there a second? Mr. Moore seconds the motion. Is there any discussion? Then we're ready to vote. Some haven't been recorded yet, though. Mr. Dudley, okay. That motion passes unanimously. Well, I'm proud for y'all, I'm proud for us that we can join together, and we had great dialogue between us. I know that will continue. So moving on. Well, I'm sure. Next is finance. No attachments or anything. Capital asset policies. Let me look at this better here. Okay. Some of those policies were passed by the Financial Management Board, so you might explain to those that weren't here at the work session might understand.
That is the same capital asset policy that we follow at the county. The Financial Management Board voted to adopt it as of July the 1st of 2018, and that's something that I needed to specify, so it's in the minutes, Ms. Shirley, because audit really wants to make sure that that date is important, because that will make the fixed asset limit from $5,000 to $10,000, and since we actually have that position in place now, they're trying to actually go ahead and start cleaning up the fixed asset listing and the inventory and everything for the audit purposes and get everything caught up. So the limit, this policy changes the limit of the fixed assets from $5,000 to $10,000 to match the county.
Okay, which we don't have to vote on, that was.
No, it's just,
an
of course,
FYI.
another one of the policies that was voted on by the board, and as we present any policies, like we said to the Financial Management Board last meeting, we'll bring them to the board so everybody's aware of it.
All right. The next one, though, we will need to vote on, that's the, surplus and fixed assets, correct?
Yes, and then, of course, the part 1 is capital asset policy, part 2 is, these are actually items. If you look at the attachment, there is a bunch of items that have either been auctioned on sales like a long time ago, and they're still sitting on the books, and this is just making everybody aware that technically those, we don't have those items, and they're sitting on our books, so it's cleanup item for audit.
Motion to approve as presented.
All right. Mr. Moore, made the motion, is a second. Mr. Penning seconded the motion. Any discussion? Then we're ready to vote. Has everyone voted? Mr. Dudley, have you voted? You vote, okay. That motion does pass. she's right there. I don't know what she's doing. Yeah. Did we get Mr. Penny's vote? Okay, that motion does pass. The next is budget amendments, also from, Mr. Conan, some of them, to review and approve. The first one is, the pre-K additional instructional material allocation. The other one is a human, resources allocation. These are all, policies, and then a reallocation of funds to cover CTE. These are budget amendments, excuse me, I'm sorry. Is there any, motion to approve? Mr. Moore, motion, huh? Mr. Sims seconded the motion. Is there any discussion? Then we're ready to vote.
Sorry,
Oh, excuse me, Ms. Parker.
I'm sorry. I had a question for you on the last two, which I don't know if you'll be able to answer, particularly the one on CTE for stipends. It says it's to be used for, hotel reservations for CTE Summer Institute, and it looks like from stipends that weren't used. Do we know why the stipends weren't used?
I wouldn't know that, but if you need information on it, I can email the department and get you an answer on it. Do you want that?
Can Dr. Marzak answer on that?
No, ma'am, not without the CTE director here. I can't answer specific questions, no, ma'am.
Okay. The next one, I guess, was, the human resources one. If you can't give me that answer, that would be helpful, but it's gonna be hard for me to vote on it without.
The stipend?
Right, if you can get that information, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
And then, I mean, if there is something like that, we could actually bring it back on, since we have another meeting
On
this
the
week, we could bring
26th.
it back on that day too, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Then the other thing was, it just says move per A. Alexander.
Yeah, so it's just moving $1,000 from one line item to another line item from her budget, she needed more money in, other contracted services. And she's right here too, so.
Sure.
That was to satisfy, we have an ADA requirement for an employee, and so that was to satisfy that.
Any other discussion? The motion to accept all of them as, okay, and it's been seconded as well, so we're ready to vote. Okay, and that motion does pass. Next, we have some policies, to be adopted and waived, the 30-day. The first one being policy 1.400, change of the board meeting, and work session to the first and third Monday. And the second one is the language, that we added to the discipline without a change in anything else in that policy, but to add the language about vaping. Is there,
Motion to approve both as presented and waive the 30-day posting for both policies.
Second.
all right, it's been, motion's been made by David Moore and Mr. Pennings. Is there any discussion? Then we're ready to vote. Okay, the next policy is one to be posted, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, it passes, sorry. 3.402 is the language that was added to reflect the Murray County, policy governing the use of Murray County Board of Education-owned policies. Dr. Marzak asked to speak to it.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Kinzer. So if it pleases the board, management would like to take an opportunity to review this to add further language and further clean it up to meet the needs of the school system. So I'd like to ask the board to delay this until the July work session and allow us time to edit it.
What are your wishes? I don't see a motion, so we could just move it to the work session? Okay. All right, then we'll move on to the next one, which is, to waive the policy, and that's the policy, Representatives Pecky, Curzio, and, Hensley want to use, the Schools for Town meetings, and we're asking to waive the policy for them to do that. They would, be the brunt of, for the SROs and, but to waive, for them to have a public meeting there, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Motion by Mr. Moore to approve, is there a second? Mr. Beaver, second. Sorry, Mr. Pennings. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Parker.
Sorry, I just have a question about this. When we're waiving the policy, I assume we're doing that so they don't have to provide insurance. Is that the main reason? Okay. And the charges as well? Okay. We're gonna take that liability on. And you're okay with us doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's educational in purpose. I don't see that you do basketball games, you do all these other things, so no, I don't think it's huge.
Well, that's
extra.
covered under ours though, isn't it? If we have basketball games?
Well, it's still coming under yours. I mean,
Okay,
if someone gets
that's what I
hurt
mean.
on property during one of these events, it's gonna be on your insurance, but
Right.
I'm positive your insurance will cover it. It's not like it would be an uncovered event.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we've had a motion, correct? Okay. Any other discussion? Then we're ready to vote. They would have to take it under advisement. Okay, and that does pass. Okay, we're ready for other business. We've got some instructional low bids. No. No.
Operational bids on copy paper. So we got,
What's this one right here?
there's nothing under it.
Okay, all right, excuse me, operation. Okay, operational low bids and purchases under for, bid number 19-065 copy paper. Is there any discussion? Is Mr. Moore?
I guess, do we need a motion technically first before we start discussing?
I think that's
Yeah,
good.
so I'll make a motion on this, to approve it.
And Ms. Parker seconds the motion.
And then I have a question.
All right.
So, I know we go over this every year, and if somebody could, how do we get to this again? I know, and it seems like every year again, we have things come up from schools about the fact that there's shortages, or there's, about how paper is used. Could we cover that a little bit about how we get to this amount? Is this correct? Because I know something when I was, considering, oh, okay, not me. When I was looking at this, I guess one of the things I started to consider was, if we have parents, or if we have, if students or parents are bringing in paper to kind of supplement, does that kind of mess with the number of what we order at all? Or has anybody even considered that, of what that does to, if I as a parent decide to bring in 5 or 10 boxes to my school of copy paper, how does that impact what we're ordering?
Okay, Dr. Marzak?
It doesn't impact it at all. This is what we're ordering to supply the schools with the amount that we receive as per the BEP. So this is happening during the June board meeting, so the paper is there on August 1st when school starts, or actually July 25th when teachers come back. Normally, we haven't done this until July. We are not having a meeting in July, which means sometimes it came in August. So Dr. Woodard and I talked, and I reminded him, make sure let's have this on the June agenda, so we can have it July 25th when teachers get in. So it doesn't impact that at all.
Sorry. Am I the only one sitting here with a light on? Oh, no, I think Mr. Dudley.
What formula is used for distribution of this paper? Is it on a per student
That's a great question.
basis, or
I
don't
can,
want Central getting all of it, I want it to
oh,
be
no. Well,
distributed.
not only that, in
And
addition,
And
yeah,
I don't have nothing against Central, I just threw out a name.
yes, sir,
I'd like for it to be distributed on a per student basis.
yes, yes, and it's much similar in the way that Title I paper works. They distribute a certain box per teacher, so it operates along the same distribution lines.
You know, I think every school handles that differently. I'm sure we could ask each one of these different schools how it's handled, but I know that when I was at Central, we had a certain number of copies we could use. Every teacher had the same number, and the copy machine kept up with those. And I don't know what other school, but I think it's school-based as to how that is distributed. Stan, Mr. Breeden, hey.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I think I shed some light on the distribution method. What happens is each school is contacted and asked how much paper they need. They submit their paper order, and then that is subtracted from their BEP allocation. The BEP allocation is divided on a per student basis, but each school just submits their paper order based on their need. So it ends up, if a school asks for more paper, one school than another, then that will reduce the amount that they get distributed to the BEP allocation per school. But each school decides how much paper they need. Different teachers and different schools use different amounts.
So if a school requests 100 reams of paper, then that will be deducted from their BEP, where another school say, no, I don't need but 50, but their BEP allocation would be more because it wasn't deducted. Okay. Excuse me, I am missing lights here, I'm sorry. Ms. Morency, did you? No, okay. All right. Okay. All right, then, I see no light, so then we're ready to vote.
We need a second.
Oh, we,
Oh, never mind, sorry, never mind, got it, sorry.
yeah, Ms. Parker seconded. Mhm. Yeah. Okay, next on the agenda is the superintendent's evaluation presentation document.
Thank you, ma'am. So board members, all of the evaluation documents are uploaded. I will send out at the end of this meeting the digital form where you can go in and log it yourself. Mr. Dudley, you should have your paper copy. Dropped it off down there. If anybody else would like a paper copy, I'm more than happy to make one for you. But other than that, you will receive the email as soon as this meeting ends.
I think that it would be realistic to give you all to the end of July, 1 month. Have it in by the end of July. Does that sound, or should it be sooner? What do you think? End of July. Ms. Parker?
I was just gonna say, I think our next board meeting will be on the 5th, so I don't know how long it'll take to calculate before that, but I think maybe 2 weeks before that would be reasonable.
Well, actually, if you said a month from now, that would be, let's just say, that would be close.
Close, that's fine.
I don't have a calendar in front of me. But we'll send out reminders, and just a reminder to new board members, and honestly, the first time I had to do this evaluation, it was difficult. I didn't read it, didn't feel like I did a very good job, and spend as much time as I would. If you give a 1, you need to explain it, or 2. If you give a 5, you need to explain that as well. So you don't just go through and give numbers. You need to be thoughtful, and because the whole idea of this is, just like when we evaluate teachers, we evaluate our only employee, and so if there are areas that he needs to improve, then we need to let him know. It's the only opportunity we have. And the same, if he's doing something right that we approve of, then that's the opportunity we have to write that as well. So, I know two of you need, hard copies. Hopefully there are no others. but those will be provided as well. So, what would be the date a month from now? What day would that, this is the 24th, so, the 24th?
24th of July.
The 24th of July. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, and for new board members, so you will see the evaluation presentation document. Basically, what I did in that document is for every single indicator and every single score you're supposed to give, I provided data and evidence for that individual indicator. So if you were to print out the evaluation document, Mr. Dudley will see that it's quite thick. It's 52 pages. So over the last month and a half, I've taken time to add evidence to each one of those indicators to help you score that to the best of your ability. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Okay, moving on. Mr. Pennings, we moved up the Mount Pleasant, the approval of a Mount Pleasant soccer. It was in the FYI. And Dr. Marzak's been looking through board policy because Mr. Pennings feels that this should have been added in February. If there's any other board members that have some inkling as to where this might be in policy so we can check. We can either interpret it and say soccer exists in all of our schools, so adding it to that school is just adding a sport that's already in our county. Is that the way you're? Okay, Mr. Penny.
I know when we did the policy, we didn't mean that if you start sumo wrestling, that's a new sport. We meant if you start a new sport in any school, in other words, if you don't have soccer and you are going to want to start soccer, as far as your school is concerned, that is a new sport. That was the intent of the policy. And we did that they should be submitted no later than February, if I recall the policy correctly, because most sports, a coach has to have a stipend, and we wanted to know everything we had to do to put in the budget. And that's the reason we made that policy. So just because they have basketball at Central, but they don't have basketball at Mount Pleasant, doesn't mean, it means that if they add basketball at Mount Pleasant, as far as Mount Pleasant is concerned, that would be a new sport for that school.
Mr. Porter.
We've looked through policy and tried to find something regarding that policy, but we can't find that policy unless it's somewhere that we're not aware of regarding that policy. But to my understanding, when you all approved the slate of sports, that was how I understood it and how it had been explained to me. So if I misunderstood how it was provided to me, then, I guess we'll have to make that adjustment as far as that approval process is concerned. But there's also, as it pertains to sports in general, based on what is approved, there are, as I've mentioned before, discrepancies on that approval based on the sports that were approved and why they were approved. It's kind of the reason why I brought up some of the things that I brought up the last work study session, even as it pertains to policy and how we formulate our oversight piece of it as a board. And basically we said that a handbook would possibly suffice for that. But I guess looking for more guidance on those levels of approval.
Mr. Pointer, just so you know, because we have been in contact with TSBA to find out where this policy is. This was an old policy, Mr. Penning, 6.702, that TSBA took out during our last review. So that's why we can't find it.
Don't get me wrong, I'm glad that they are starting
Right.
soccer and everything. I just want to make sure that we're not violating any policy.
We're not.
Mr.
Yeah, one of the things, maybe we need to modify something because like this late in the game, is all the coaches gonna get what they deserve this coming season?
That varies based on every year, based on budget and approvals of the budget. That's all how that's going to be determined with specifics on that. Based on how we have it set up, every coach should receive what they should receive. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't.
Yeah, but if that sport is not going, hadn't already started, how's that coach gonna get a stipend if
It's his stipend
it's
budget.
gonna be a year late?
You talking about in the pay a year late?
Yes.
Or, well, no, I mean, it would just be based on what the monetary amount of the stipend that's being allocated for that lump sum of the sport. I mean, the stipends and the way that we handle stipends from a budgetary standpoint.
Yeah, but don't we have to put it in our budget every year?
Yes, we do put it in the budget every year, yes, sir.
So if at this point right here, it's too late to get it into our budget.
I wouldn't think.
In 2 months from now, if you decide, well, we're gonna play soccer, how do we compensate that?
I don't necessarily know how we compensate that, but I would think that we have it built into the budget to be able to try to cover based on how we have allocated the budget for the stipends this upcoming year.
Mr. Dudley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We did vote on this as a policy matter under the previous athletic director, and why TSBA decided to remove it, but we, at that time, we had schools coming every month of the year wanting to approve a sport, and we decided that, the board at that time decided they wanted to set a deadline, and we chose February as the deadline that they had to submit the request by, to be considered, for the upcoming, next school year. You know, I agree. I've got concerns as to how it's budgeted, the stipend. But I think one of the things is we wanted to make sure that we had facilities that could handle that particular sport. And I really don't want us go back to having sports requests all throughout the year. I'd like for us to consider them by February in one lump sum, and that way we can address any issue that may be associated with it in 1 month.
Mr. Penning?
I believe part of that discussion, Mr. Dudley, if you remember right, was it would be okay to start soccer at Mount Pleasant, but because it was after that time of February, the coach would not be paid a stipend this year. And if I remember, that was part of the discussion.
Okay, Mr. Howell?
How much is the stipend we're talking about?
Of a first year teacher salary, depending on if they're a teacher or not. So it's either 5 or 8%. I don't know off the top of my head for a soccer coach. Might be less than that. Might be.
I think it's 5%.
5%. So it's not. It's whatever. If it's a non-faculty coach, it's 5% of a first year teacher salary. If it's a salary teacher, to be 5% based off of their salary is what it'll be. Is what it'll amount to.
Okay. Do we have a coach in mind?
They have identified someone who wants to help, but they are doing an interest meeting. They can't start the sport, obviously, unless they have the minimum number of participants to outfit a soccer team. So they're having those conversations now. They do know that is a growing interest in Mount Pleasant. And we're talking about girls soccer is what we're looking at trying to start. So there's a significant interest, and they have to meet the minimum. So basically, from moving forward, if it's the will of the board to, address it by having it in February, which was something that I wasn't aware about, then we'll make sure that it's done by February, and we can address Mount Pleasant Middle School. And if, based on what Mr. Pennis is saying, that if it comes afterwards, then they'll just have to do it the first year voluntarily, and after that, we'll try to roll it in as a stipend from a budgetary.
The person may have of interest to volunteer?
I'm not.
Okay.
I don't know that, but I can ask. I can find out.
Thank you.
Ms. Morency?
If this is not in our policy, written anywhere in our policy, I don't know how we can hold them to that. There is a lot of interest in Mount Pleasant in soccer. There are no soccer teams at all in Mount Pleasant, so everybody that wants to play soccer has to travel at least to Columbia to do that. So I think that, I don't know what the interest is, and I haven't talked to them about this, But if it's not in policy, if it's not written in there, then we need to put it in, either put it back in, but I don't think that we can hold them responsible for, coming to the board, or coming in by February. If it was in there, they may possibly have had it in by February. So, that's just, if you think that you can find it in your budget, for this stipend, then I see no reason to punish them for not having it in when we don't have that in our policy.
I'll talk it over with leadership, tomorrow after the meeting, and then we'll look at the numbers, and then I'll also talk with Mount Pleasant, and, we'll address it from that perspective moving forward, so there's a lot more comfort level in, you know, what sports we had. Because basically the way that we understood it and the way that I understood it was basically a slate of sports were already approved for the county, and if we added a completely new sport, for example, like he said, sumo wrestling, then we would bring that to the board. So, did not understand that in that specific, did not see it in policy or anywhere written, or was in any handbook that we had, and so that's just kind of where we left it at from there, based on interpretation.
Mr. Moore?
A couple of things. Is this something that has to come out of this meeting, or could it be carried over to the July meeting?
We don't have a July meeting.
Or whatever the next meeting is?
Well, just for discussion here, we definitely need to bring that policy the one that's been deleted back, and let us discuss it at the work session, which would be July. Would there be any reason to deny this at this point? No. I mean, I think we all want them to have soccer.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It's in your athletic handbook. It just says, schools cannot add a new sport for supplemental pay without permission from the school board, and the request must be made by April 1 prior to the new fiscal year. So it looks like it came out of policy, but it's still in your, athletic handbook.
Even at that, we're past that time, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've got
Dr.
some further review, yes. So apparently, the board, during the January 26, 2017 meeting, agreed by majority vote to remove 6.702 from policy. So this policy hasn't been in effect for almost over 2 years.
But the manual, which we are approving.
Not yet.
No, that's a
Yeah.
totally separate,
Yeah.
I wasn't even, whatever that is, I'm not even involved with that part of it.
Okay.
That's a whole totally different manual that I'm talking about.
All right.
But again, whatever the will of the board is, we can do, and if it is that we need to not have a paid coach as a stipend and still operate the sport, because basically it's coming down to the stipend. The sport itself is operating as all of our other sports do, are trying to operate independently and raise their own funds to do so. So if that's the will of the board and the concern, then I'll have a conversation with Dr. Drinkwine, and we'll make sure that we address it accordingly.
All right. I believe Mr. Pennings was next, and then Ms. Hopkins.
Like I said, I'm not against Mount Pleasant having a soccer team, they should. But it gets to be important about having it in policy. We will have to renew a policy or make a policy. Because if you get, out of our 23 schools that we'll have, 22 schools, you get half of them starting a new sport with a stipend, that can add up to a considerable sum for the year. And that's the reason we did that, so we could budget for the things we needed. And we still have to have that ability. So we're gonna have to look to it and redo the policy. Thank you, sir.
I was just gonna say, I thank you for always doing what you do for the athletic department. Athletics is so important, more than, with academics and all. But like, I was with, Ms. Lorenzi when she said the policy is not there and not stated. You can't lock somebody into something that's not there. And we do want them to have, the proper things they need in athletics.
I don't know that it takes action on this. You all, but it was on FYI, it's just telling us that Mount Pleasant was gonna have soccer. Are we okay with that, or Ms. Parker, help me?
Can I just ask a question just for future reference?
Sure.
For our agendas? Because it looks like this was done on like June 17th, 18th, or whatever was what the memo says, but that's after our work session. How many things are getting put on FYI for us after our, you know, 'cause the whole point is for us to be able to talk about it at our work session. And I understand things come up, but I think it would be helpful for our board if we get like a notification or something that says, hey, FYI, this has been added. 'Cause I'll be honest with you, a lot of the things that we have talked about at our work session get moved to FYI, and so, you know, maybe sometimes we just skim it a little bit. There's a lot of stuff to go through, I'm just being honest.
Most all of them asked me if something's going to be put on. I did not get any word about this, and it wasn't in our work session as well. So, I don't know who's next, Mr. Moore.
This is why I'm going back to why I was asking if this go to the next meeting. There's obviously there's some confusion here on views of how this should be handled or should have been handled. I definitely do not agree if this was put on FY after we had the work session. I just don't find that acceptable at all. And I don't know who did it or how it ended up there. The entire point of the work session is so that we can look at these things and have a chance to discuss many of the things we're discussing right now. We could have cleared this up, which is why I would ask again, unless some action has to be taken tonight, I would prefer this to go to whatever the next meeting is, whether that be a work session or a full board meeting, so that we can have some clarification on what action we do need to take, if action needs to be taken.
Dr. Marzak did email me about this. I take full responsibility. I assumed that it's just adding a sport, and I didn't know about the policy. So it's your leadership here, I guess. But yes, let's discuss it. At the next at the work session, adding the policy to clarify it. Okay. In the meantime, in the July work session, which is the 15th.
I was saying if it was going to be in August, then what we would just do is we would just get with Mount Pleasant Middle School, and the coach this year would have to be a volunteer, because stipends start activating in August. And so if it was going to be after that fact, then basically, I mean...
I think we're saying that you can have soccer, but we're going to have to discuss the policy going forward as to
Understood.
Is that the way you understand it? That probably have to have a volunteer coach this year?
I'll be honest, I'm kind of on the fence on that.
Okay.
I still have questions about the answer as far as where the funding comes from. How we're adding a position, but yet we're just going to pull it from the whole pot. I mean, I thought we budgeted for an amount of money for those stipends. We just add those in throughout. I mean, again, this gets back to the point Mr. Beaver and Mr. Pennings were both making about when we budget for these stipends for the entire year. I would assume we budget for a set amount of positions or a somewhat close dollar figure. I didn't know we just kind of lump sum and we just start pulling out of it as we add new sports or whenever. That's, again, these are concerns that I would have preferred to have worked out in a work session.
Mr. Pennings.
Well, see, excuse me, and it becomes more important, because when you start talking about Title I, now you start a new sport in a school, you have to talk about busing. You have to talk about everything that all the other schools have. So you're not just adding a stipend for the coach, you're adding a lot of other expenses too. And that may not happen this year, most likely will not happen this year. But in the future, it will. So that's why we have to revisit our policy on adding new sports, because there's gonna be more to budget than just the coach's stipend.
We'll have further discussion about it at the July.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, Mr. Howell.
It looks just like, I mean, the budget, you can't budget down to the dollar amount. It's based on the teacher. You may have a different teacher every year, and their salaries could be different every year. 5% of 40, 5% of 42, 5% of 32, it's all gonna be different. So I can see where we may have a little extra money. We may not have any money at all. It just depends. I would like to know how close we are on that. So.
Okay, moving on. The next thing, and also this should have not been in FY as well, the MOU on the Malin Moore Road and the City of Spring Hill. Mr. Moore, do you want to speak to it?
I just would go ahead and start off with, I would like to make a motion to cancel the MOU with the City of Spring Hill in regards to the Malin Moore property. I think that's how it was originally worded.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right.
If I could say just one thing. I think we went over this in the work session.
We did.
I just do want to, say that in my opinion, this does not preclude us from having a good working relationship with the City of Spring Hill. If something comes back up and we want to revisit this, I just feel like that it's in our best interest as a school system right now to free ourselves up from this agreement that has some conditions that maybe not be favorable for getting the best interest of our students and taking care of these problems. I think it frees us up to be able to explore some other options.
Right, and thank you for the communication you gave to us about that, and with, Mr. Wollerberry as well. So, okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? Then we're ready to vote. Okay, next is the Spring Hill, the motion did pass. I'm trying, Mr. Dudley wanted us to get you out quickly here. See, I'm nothing.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
does the board want us to put the city on some kind of formal notice that it's been canceled, or do you wanna,
Yep, by
just a
action of the board, yes.
short and sweet letter? Okay, I'll work with superintendent on that.
And it does pass. All right, next is the Spring Hill Planning Commission, comments to, Battle Creek Middle School site plan. Do you want to speak to that also, Mr. Moore?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to, overrule the disapproval of the site plan with additions for the Battle Creek Middle and Elementary Schools.
Okay, the motion is to overrule, the,
I'll say that one again, sorry.
yeah, please.
So the motion is to overrule the disapproval of the site plan for the Battle Creek Elementary and Middle Schools.
Is there a second? Several seconds, Mr. Howell, I saw his light, so he can be the seconder. Any discussion, Mr. Howell?
Do we need to take any action on this? I think we discussed this, and
Jake?
As I said at the meeting, I don't think it's necessary, but I think it's a good idea that you do it. If there's any question at all, why not do it and let them move on from it, and you guys move on from it. But no, from a legal standpoint, I don't think it's absolutely necessary. Evidently, they do.
Well, from my understanding, this was only put on here because of one alderman directed their city manager to do it. Can one of us direct Chris to do something? I'm just saying, it just sounds like it's, from a standpoint, I don't know that it's even on here correctly.
Mr. Moore?
So if I could address that. After a lot of discussion, I've discussed with Jake as well, I would agree that there's definitely a lot of gray area here, and the more I look at it, the more gray area I find. However, it is my opinion at this point that the action, if we were to take this motion and take action on this, that we are not in any way compromising our position. However, I think we are satisfying some other things that would keep us in a good standing with the City of Spring Hill. I do not feel this has been a concern of mine as I look at this to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in some kind of compromised position as a district. I don't feel like this action would do that.
To me, it just kind of sounds like they want to put these stipulations on here when they can only say yes or no. They said yes, but, which is something they can't say, but on the paper it says, that's what it says. And so to me, it just kind of looks like, well, hey, we tried to alleviate this traffic condition that's caused by these schools that the school board has built, but they overruled us. So that's the thing, it's just my concern there.
Mr. Moore?
I would just say this, I believe at last week's meeting for the city, they did go ahead and start the motion, or start whatever their process is for approving some of the temporary lights at some of the other facilities. I believe they are moving ahead to address some of the other issues, I think at the Hummingbird Lane, as well as at Malin Moore and Kedron. In the interest of that, again, they're moving that through their board. It seems like that is taking a favorable approach. I think this is similarly moving us all in the right direction to be safe for our kids and for the people moving on those streets.
Okay, this motion on the floor is, everyone ready to vote? That motion does pass. Now, just let me give you some reminders here. Excuse me. Mr. Beaver?
Yes.
We're meeting Wednesday at 5 o'clock to, approve, the cleanup budget amendments. I really need a quorum. The commission will get those on Thursday. We want to do that so that we don't have any, audit findings for that, just that cleanup, and this was announced prior to, so please let me know if you can't be there, but if I don't hear from you, I expect you there, so, it should be a, it should be a short meeting, I think. That's the only thing on the agenda is, Doug will bring budget amendments to us. And let me also say that, the budget committee met and they have scheduled another meeting to clarify, the proposal. They, had voted the other night to give us $103.5 million, and, rather than us, meet, I think we'll wait and meet after the budget meeting, which is the 8th, and then we'll schedule a meeting after that, and I'll be in touch with you all as to when that would be, sometime in July. We certainly will have some more work to do, that's for sure, so, anyway, with that said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Made and seconded, all those in favor say aye.